Here is a concept in pharmacology called the therapeutic window. It is the range between the dose that heals and the dose that kills. Too little, and there is no effect. Too much, and we are having a very different conversation. The entire job of a pharmacist, if I am being completely honest, is to balance inside that space between benefit and harm. I balanced for 17 years. At work, I was good at it. At home, as it turned out, not so much. My name is Helen. I am 43 years old. I am the senior pharmacist at the University Medical Center Pharmacy. And I found out my husband was having an affair while sorting through a prescription queue on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon at 2:30. Not through a friend, not through Instagram, not through a note in his jacket pocket, through a database. Through the system I work in every single day. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I do. When I tell this story to people, the few people I have told it to, they start out with polite sympathy. And then somewhere in the middle their face does a thing. You know the thing. That slow shift that means. Wait, are you saying what I think you are saying? Yes, that is exactly what I am saying. But let me start from the beginning. Because if you jump into the middle, it really does sound like a bad detective novel. And I want you to understand that there was nothing cheap about any of this. Just 17 years, 3 children, and data that was right in front of me the whole time. Let me start with Patrick, with who he was when I married him. We met during his first year of residency. He was in internal medicine. I was just starting out at the pharmacy. Both exhausted, both running on coffee and ambition. He was the kind of person who made you feel safe just by being in the room, not because of looks or money. There was something steady about him, like a well-formulated diagnosis. Clear, reliable. I thought I was good at reading people. It is an occupational thing, seeing patterns behind symptoms, finding logic behind what looks like coincidence. I thought, Tuesday at 2:30 is the quietest time in our pharmacy. The morning rush has cleared, the evening wave has not started yet. Colleagues rotate out for lunch one by one. I stay at the counter. It has been my habit for so long it is basically a reflex. 17 years, the same rhythm. That day I had 42 prescriptions in the queue. I remember the number because I checked it later. 42, and one of them triggered a system flag. Let me explain how that works. When a physician prescribes a controlled substance, anything in Schedule III or IV with abuse potential, the system runs an automatic check on frequency and pattern. If the same doctor is prescribing to the same patient too often, or the dosage is escalating without a clear clinical reason, or the intervals between prescriptions are shrinking, a flag appears. My job is to verify. Call the office, confirm the prescription, make sure everything is within protocol. Standard procedure. I had done it hundreds of times. The flag was on alprazolam, a benzodiazepine prescribed for anxiety disorders and sometimes insomnia. The prescription was in the name of a Meredith Calloway, 28 years old. It was her 4th prescription in 7 months, and the dose had been increased twice. Nothing criminal in itself. Patients sometimes genuinely need dose adjustments, but protocol is protocol. I looked at the name of the prescribing physician, Dr. Patrick Hale, my husband. I stood at the counter and looked at the screen for about 3 seconds, maybe 5. The pharmacy hummed around me. Behind me, Jennifer from the day shift was opening a lunch bag. Then I picked up the phone and called his office. Patrick's office, Tamara answered. His assistant. Her voice was what it always was. Slightly tired, professional. Helen from pharmacy, I said. I need to verify a controlled substance prescription from Dr. Hale. Patient name is Calloway Meredith. A pause. A very short one. The kind I would not have noticed before. 1 moment, she said. I will check the schedule. The schedule, not "I will confirm the prescription." The schedule, I waited. I looked at the screen, 7 months, 4 prescriptions. I scrolled back through the full history. The system keeps everything. First prescription dated January of last year. Alprazolam, 0.5 milligrams. July, 1 milligram. October, 1.5. And now, February, she had come back for another. This is called dose escalation. In the textbooks, it usually means one of two things. Either the initial dose was insufficient or tolerance is developing. Both scenarios require careful physician oversight. Judging by everything, the oversight had been very careful indeed. I hear how that sounds, I really do, and I want to be clear about something. In that moment, I was not certain of anything yet. The pharmacist in me was clinging to protocol. Maybe the patient had a severe anxiety disorder. Maybe the escalation was completely justified. My husband was a good doctor. I knew that. Did I? Tamara came back on the line. Dr. Hale confirms the prescription, she said. Everything is in order. Thank you, Tamara, I said. I hung up, processed the prescription, checked the box in the system, everything by protocol. Then I opened the patient's full history from the very beginning. I should have gone to lunch. Sandwich in the lunchbox, 15 minutes in the break room, coffee from the machine. An ordinary Tuesday. Instead, I pulled my chair closer to the screen and opened the complete patient profile. Meredith Calloway, 28 years old. Address in the Riverside District. A good neighborhood. Young professionals, coffee shops, yoga studios. First visit to Dr. Hale, September of the year before last. Not January, as I had assumed. September. I sat with that for a moment. September of the year before last. I had just come back from summer vacation. The kids had started school. Patrick and I had been talking about finally redoing the kitchen. An ordinary September, nothing remarkable about it. In the system, I could see everything. Every visit, every prescription, every referral. Patrick had seen her 7 times over 17 months, slightly above average for an outpatient anxiety patient, but not alarming. Not the kind of thing that jumps out at you, unless you look at the dates. I looked at the dates. First visit, September, a Friday, 6 in the evening, last slot of the day. Second, October, Friday, 6 again. Third, December, Friday. Then January, March, May, all Fridays, all evenings. Fine, maybe Fridays worked for her schedule. Maybe she had a job that kept her busy until then. A reasonable explanation. I am good at reasonable explanations. 17 years of marriage will teach you that. But I had already opened the next tab. Our system has a function that rarely gets used, mostly for insurance audits. It shows the timestamp when a physician closes out a patient chart. In other words, when they finish their documentation after an appointment. Standard practice is to close within an hour. Patrick was thorough. I knew that. I ran the query across all 7 of Meredith Calloway's visits. Average time between end of appointment and chart closure, 2 hours and 40 minutes. I looked at that number, 2 hours and 40 minutes. For comparison, I pulled Patrick's chart closure data across his other patients. His average there was 38 minutes. I checked. Of course I checked. I am a pharmacist. When I see an anomaly, I verify against the baseline. 2 hours and 40 minutes after 6 in the evening is almost 9 o'clock. Patrick came home on Fridays around 10. He always said it was documentation. Complex cases to review. Sometimes colleagues ran late. I never pushed further. Why would I? I trusted him. The therapeutic window. Too little suspicion and you live in blindness. Too much and you destroy what was working. I had stayed carefully in the middle. I called it wisdom. Jennifer came back from lunch and looked at me. Helen, she said, did you eat? In a minute, I told her. And I opened one more tab. I want to be clear about something before I go on. I know this part can sound unsettling, like I was systematically surveilling my husband through hospital records. I was not. I had access. I had a professional reflex that said, anomaly, verify, check the baseline. It is the same reflex that catches dosing errors and catches prescription fraud and apparently, on one Tuesday in February, catches 17 months of Friday evening appointments. I never looked for this. It found me. I gave myself 2 days before I said anything. That was a conscious decision, not a moment of weakness. I knew that if I walked into the conversation unprepared, he would find a way around it. Patrick was good at finding his way around things. For 17 years, I had thought of that as his ability to stay calm under pressure. Now I understood it was just an ability. Saturday, I spent in a state of total normalcy. That turned out to be easier than it should have been. Breakfast, groceries, Marcus to practice, Sophie to a friend's house. Patrick fixed the bathroom faucet that had been dripping for 3 weeks. I watched him working under the sink and thought, here is a man who fixes faucets. A good husband, right? Fixes faucets, feeds the children, kisses you on the temple in the kitchen, comes home at 10 on Fridays. Sunday morning, I called Patrick's mother. He called her Mom. I had always called her by her name, Dorothy. I told her we needed to go through some things in storage and the kids would just get in the way. Dorothy did not ask questions. She rarely asked questions. I had always taken that for tact. The kids left at 10:30. I printed 3 pages, not accusations. Data. A chronology, appointment dates, intervals between prescriptions, dosage progression, average chart closure time. Everything I had legally accessed within the scope of my professional role. Nothing beyond that. I printed it, aligned the margins, stapled it, like a work report. Then I made coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. Patrick came out of the bedroom at 11:30. He always slept later on Sundays. He was in sweatpants, carrying his mug, with the face of a man who had nowhere to be. Are the kids at Mom's? He asked. Yes. He sat down across from me. He looked at the 3 pages lying face down on the table. What is that? I sat down, I said. He was already sitting. I said it anyway, just to begin. I turned the pages over and put them in front of him. On Tuesday, I verified a prescription, I said. Meredith Calloway alprazolam, 4th prescription in 7 months. System flag, standard procedure. I called Tamara, she confirmed the prescription. Then I looked a little wider. He did not pick up the pages. He looked at them. Then he looked at me. There is a moment in a difficult conversation when a person chooses their strategy. I had seen it many times over 17 years. In arguments about small things, in conversations about hard things. Patrick always chose calm. He would speak more slowly. He would become very reasonable, very measured. That was his defense. He chose it now. Helen, he said, do you understand that this is protected patient information? I am a pharmacist, I said. I verified the prescription within the scope of my role. Everything is legal. But that is not what I want to talk about. What do you want to talk about? 17 months, every Friday, 2 hours and 40 minutes after the end of the appointment. Silence. Good silence. Very informative silence. That is not what you think, he said finally. I waited. Because I knew that after that phrase there is always another one. People cannot stop at that is not what you think. They need to fill the silence with something. She is genuinely a patient, he said. Nothing was violated. It is just Patrick. He stopped. I do not need an explanation about protocol, I said. I need an honest answer to one question. One question, Patrick. And I want you to answer it the way you answer patients when you give them bad news. You know how to do that. I have seen you. Just tell me the truth. A long pause. He looked at the table. Yes, he said quietly. She is not only a patient. I nodded. I did not cry then. The tears came later that night, after the kids were back and everyone was asleep. At the kitchen table, I just nodded, because when the data confirms the hypothesis, you do not feel surprised. You just record the result. How long, I said. Helen, how long? 17 months, so from the very beginning, from the first appointment. I gathered my 3 pages, straightened the edges, put them back in the folder I had brought with me. The kids will be back at 6, I said. I need you gone before then. He did not stand up. I said what I needed to say, and he just sat there with the coffee that had gone cold, looking at the table. Then he looked up. Can I say something? You already are. Helen. He said my name the way he had not said it in a long time, not as an address, as something he was holding in his hands and did not know where to put down. I am not going to explain myself. I am not going to say it meant nothing or that I did not know what I was doing. That would be disrespectful. I looked at him. Disrespectful, I said. Yes, so the affair is respectful, but the explanation is not. That is not what I mean. Then tell me what you mean, Patrick. You have until 6. A long pause. He stood up, poured himself fresh coffee, came back. That bothered me somehow, the coffee. Such an ordinary gesture in the middle of all of this. 17 years of ordinary gestures. I do not know how to start, he said finally. From the beginning, I said, September the year before last. He nodded. He began speaking slowly, the way he always spoke in difficult situations, even measured without excess. I listened and understood. He had rehearsed this, not deliberately, not in the sense of sitting and memorizing lines. He had simply been thinking about it for a long time. He had always known this conversation would come. Meredith had come to him with panic attacks, severe, debilitating ones, the kind that made it impossible to work. He started treatment, everything within protocol. And then he paused here, a careful physician's pause, then it became something else. Something else, I said. Yes. Were you still treating her? I transferred her to a colleague in March, as soon as I understood what was happening, that I had not expected, that he had transferred the patient, that he had held at least that line, the professional one, even when he had let everything else go. And the prescriptions, a transition period while my colleague fully took over her care. 3 months, all documented. I sat and listened, and I understood something very unpleasant. He was speaking correctly. He was not making excuses. He was not lying. He was not looking for loopholes. He was presenting facts, like a case conference. And that was unbearable, not because he was lying, but because he was not, because this was the real Patrick. This calm, precise, professional man, the one I had married. You love her, I said. Not a question, a pause. I do not know. That is not an answer. It is an honest answer. He looked at me. Helen, I would not have come to you and told you. I know that about myself. That is a bad thing. But I would not have come. That was the worst thing he said. Not I love someone else, not I want a divorce. But I would not have come to tell you. 17 years, 3 children, a shared mortgage, the same dentist, and he would have continued. Because it was convenient. Because we had learned not to ask unnecessary questions and called that a good marriage. I thought about that for a long time afterward, about the fact that he is not a monster, which is almost worse than if he were. A monster you can hate cleanly. He was just a man who had quietly, methodically chosen himself, like a good physician managing a complex case. Carefully. No sudden interventions. Except in this case, I was the patient. Have you said everything you need to say? I asked. No, but I will say the rest when you are ready to hear it. I will never be ready to hear the rest, Patrick. He nodded. He stood up. He finished his coffee and put the mug in the sink, carefully, the way he always did. He went to the bedroom. I sat at the table and listened to him moving through the rooms, opening the closet, pulling out a suitcase, the blue one. the one we had bought together before Portugal 8 years ago. I heard the clasp click shut. 17 years, one suitcase. At 4 o'clock, he came through the kitchen with the blue suitcase and his car keys. I will call tomorrow about the kids. Fine, Helen, I looked up. I am sorry, he said. Finally, 2 hours later, I nodded, because there was nothing left to say. Dorothy brought the kids back at 6, as I had asked. She brought them herself. Richard usually handled the driving, but that evening she came. She looked at me at the door, not searching my face, not guilty, just looked and said, "Make sure they eat well tonight." Not to me, to the kids. Then she left. I fed the children, checked Ava's homework, listened to Marcus talk about Grandpa's garage. Sophie was quiet. She always felt when something was wrong from the time she was very small. At 7 years old, she used to ask, "Mom, are you okay on the inside?" Those were her exact words, on the inside. That evening, she did not ask. She just came up behind me while I was doing the dishes and held on, without saying anything. 12 years old. How do they know? At 10:30, after the house had gone quiet, the phone rang. Dorothy. I looked at the screen for a moment. Then I answered. "Helen," she said. Her voice was different. Not the even, always slightly distant voice I had known for 17 years. Different, tired. The voice of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has finally set it down. Dorothy. "He called me an hour ago," she said. "He said he had left." Yes. Silence. Long, but not uncomfortable. "I want you to know something," she said. I did not know, not all of it. But I noticed. The last several months I noticed that something was off. I did not ask him directly. I do not know why. I suppose I was afraid to hear the answer. I said nothing. I let her talk. "That is not an excuse," she said quickly. "I understand it is not an excuse. I just want you to know I was not looking away on purpose. I was hoping I was wrong." Dorothy. "Yes. I am not angry at you," I said, and I was surprised to find that was true. Another pause. Then she said quietly, "Richard is upset. He is not speaking to Patrick. I did not ask him to. He decided that himself. That I had not expected at all." Richard Hale was the kind of man from an older generation for whom family is a structure you maintain in silence, without unnecessary motion. In 17 years, he had said, "I am glad you are in our family," to me exactly once. At the wedding, and even then he had whispered it. Not because he was cold. That was simply how he talked to the world, through action, not words. And he was not speaking to his son. "The kids can come to us whenever they want," Dorothy said. "This is their home too. And you can come. I am telling you this, not Patrick. You can come." I was sitting in the kitchen in the dark. I had not turned the lights on after putting Ava to bed. I was listening to my mother-in-law. A woman I had known for 17 years and had always kept at that polite distance I had built myself. Because she was his mother. Because it seemed like she had a different loyalty, a different team. It turns out it is not that simple. "Helen," she said at the end, "you are a good mother. I have always seen that. And I want you to know that what happened is not your blindness. It is his choice. Only his." I did not know what to say to that. I said thank you. She said good night. We hung up. I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time after. You know what is strange? I had expected the hardest thing to be the conversation with Patrick, or the first night alone, or later, the conversation with the kids. But the most unexpected thing was this one, because I had not expected support from that direction. Because I had spent a long time dividing the world into mine and his, and it turned out that division was something I had invented entirely on my own. Sometimes people surprise you, even when you are a pharmacist who trusts data more than instinct. Especially then, I did not sleep much that night, not because of crying. The tears had run out somewhere around 2 in the morning. After that, I just lay in the dark and thought about how to talk to the children, running through options like prescription formulas. Too much, and it is trauma. Too little, and they fill the silence on their own, and that is worse. The therapeutic window. Again. At 6, I got up and made pancakes, not because I was hungry. I needed something to do with my hands. Ava found me in the kitchen first, in her unicorn pajamas, and climbed up on a stool. Why pancakes? It's Monday, because I felt like it. She accepted this with the philosophical ease of an 8-year-old and asked for maple syrup. Marcus came down at 7, already dressed. He always dressed before breakfast, unlike his sisters. He saw the pancakes, said "Oh nice," and sat down, then looked around. "Where's Dad? Let's eat first," I said. "Then I need to tell you something." He looked at me. 13 years old, and he already had that look. Adult, guarded, like he was bracing himself in advance for something he would not let himself show. Sophie came in last. She looked at the pancakes, at Marcus, at me. She said nothing. She just sat down. We ate mostly in silence. Then I cleared the plates, poured myself coffee, and stayed standing by the stove. Facing them. "Dad left yesterday," I said. "He is going to be staying somewhere else for a while. We decided we need some time apart." Ava looked up from the last of her syrup. "Like in the movies, a little like that. Is he coming back?" There it was. The first question, the most direct one, and it came from an 8-year-old girl in unicorn pajamas, because she had not yet developed the filter that says, "Do not ask what you might not want to hear. I do not know, sweetheart. For now, no." Marcus was looking at the table. The muscle in his jaw moved exactly the way it does in Patrick's. I had never noticed how much. "Is it because of us?" He asked quietly, still not looking up. "No," I said, right away, without hesitating, because there was no room for hesitation here. "Not at all. This is only between me and Dad. Nothing you did or said had any part in this. I need you to hold on to that." He nodded, still not looking up. Sophie had been silent through all of it. She was sitting with perfect posture, hands flat on the table, looking older than 12. Then she asked, "Did you cry last night?" "A little." "I heard you," she said. "I did not come because I did not know if I should." "You should have," I said. "You always should." She stood up, came around the table, and hugged me. Not the quick in passing kind she usually gave. A real one. I felt her breathe in deeply. The way people breathe when they have been holding it and finally do not have to. Ava slid off her stool and came over too, because Sophie was hugging me, and that was clearly the right thing to do, even if she was not entirely sure why. 8 years old is the age when you do not think it through, you just do it. Marcus stayed in his seat. I looked at him over the girls' heads. "Mark, I'm fine," he said. His voice was slightly rough. "I know you are. Come here anyway." A pause. Then he got up, the way teenagers get up when it is awkward, and hugged me with one arm, sideways. But he hugged me. We stood there in the kitchen, the 4 of us, next to the faucet Patrick had fixed and the dish rack drying in the window. And I thought, this is what remains. Not the data, not the chronology, not 3 pages with even margins. This. 3 kids who came to hug me on a Monday morning, and pancakes no one finished, and coffee I never drank. I held on until they had all gone to gather their backpacks. Then I turned to the stove and let myself cry one more time. Quietly, so no one would hear. 3 minutes, maybe 4. Then I washed my face with cold water and drove to work. Life continues. That is not an inspirational phrase. It is simply a fact. Sometimes it is the most useful one there is. The divorce took 8 months. I say that the way I give patients a treatment timeline because a specific number helps. 8 months. Not a year, not 2. A manageable stretch of time with a clear beginning and end. My friend Carolyn found me an attorney. Margaret Collins, 52 years old, short hair, a habit of speaking in short, precise sentences with nothing wasted. We liked each other immediately. At our first meeting, she asked, "Do you want justice or victory?" I said justice. She nodded and said, "Good, that is easier." The house stayed with me. Patrick did not contest it. The kids stayed with me with his right to see them every other weekend. He found an apartment 10 minutes away, not in the Riverside district. I deliberately did not look up where exactly, but not there. That detail, for reasons I cannot fully explain, made me feel better. The first time the kids went to his place for the weekend, I stayed in the house alone. It was a Saturday in late April. Patrick picked them up at 10 in the morning. I watched from the window as they loaded up his car, Ava dragging a backpack bigger than she was, Marcus carrying a sleeping bag. They had made plans to watch movies late into the night. Sophie turned back at the car and waved. I waved back. Then I closed the door. The house was completely quiet, not the way it is quiet at night when everyone is sleeping. Different. This was daytime quiet, Saturday quiet, the kind that is normally filled with breakfast sounds and voices and Marcus bouncing his basketball in the driveway. I stood in the hallway and listened to it for a couple of minutes. Then I went to the kitchen, made coffee, and sat down at the table. The same table, where 3 pages had lain face down, where his coffee had gone cold, where the blue suitcase had waited by the door. I thought, this table has seen a lot. 17 years of birthdays and homework and arguments about nothing and making up and breakfasts that no one noticed because they were simply there. And that Sunday conversation. And this Saturday silence. Furniture outlasts all of us. That should feel sad. Somehow it does not. Around noon, a message arrived. An unknown number. "My name is Meredith Calloway. I understand if you do not want to read this. But I want you to know that I did not know he was married. Not from the beginning. When I found out, it still took me longer than it should have to do anything about it. I am sorry. I read it 3 times. Then I put the phone down and finished my coffee. Then I picked it up and read it again. 28 years old. Panic attacks. She had come to a doctor for help. I had thought about this moment for a long time, about what I would feel when she wrote. I expected anger, or cold contempt, or that sharp need to say something precise and devastating, the kind that does not actually help, but feels like it should. Instead, I just sat at the kitchen table and thought about how she also did not get what she came for. She came to a doctor. She got something else. That does not make her a victim in my story. She has her own story, and I am not a victim in it either. Just 2 people one man put in a situation neither of us chose. I typed a response. Short, "Thank you for writing. I hear you, not forgiveness." I was not ready for that word, and I do not know if I ever will be. Just, "I hear you." It was enough, for her maybe. For me, definitely, I sent it. Put the phone down, stood up and opened the window. April, finally warming up. The neighbor was digging in his garden and the yard smelled like wet earth. 8 months. That was only the second one. Almost a year has passed now. Close to the day, I am sitting at the same kitchen table. Sophie and I repainted it in August. She chose dark green. I did not object. It is a different table now. The same one, but different. You understand the difference. December outside, last week of school before the holidays. Ava is rehearsing something for the winter concert and keeps singing the same line on a loop. I have stopped hearing it as noise. It is just background now. The sound of the house. The most reliable sound I know. Patrick will come Friday to pick up the kids for the weekend. We talk about exactly what is necessary. Schedules, school things, the fact that Marcus strained his shoulder at practice and needs to see an orthopedist. Negotiations between 2 people who share a project, 3 children, and nothing else. Sometimes that feels cold. More often it just feels right. I never wrote to Meredith again. She did not write to me. 1 message on each side turned out to be enough. Dorothy and Richard were here last Sunday. Dorothy brought a pie. Apple, the way she always baked for the holidays. I knew that about her and somehow never thought much of it. Now I do. Richard fixed the hinge on the back gate that had been squeaking since October, and while he worked he talked with Marcus about some old engine in the garage. I watched from the window and thought, this is what family looks like when you did not choose it and it chose you anyway, not by blood, by something else. Patrick does not call them often. No one says this out loud. We all just do not say it. But it is in the room every time they come. Parents who love their son and cannot forgive him for what he did to his own life. That is probably the heaviest consequence of all. I did not choose it and did not ask for it. It simply happened. Work is the same as it always was. 40-something prescriptions in the queue, refrigerators humming. Jennifer brings cookies on Fridays that are always too sweet. Flags, verifications, calls to physician offices. Standard procedure. Last week I verified a controlled substance prescription. Flag, call, confirmation, check the box. 30 seconds of work. I closed the tab and moved on to the next prescription, and only a few prescriptions later realized I had not paused, had not looked further, had just done the job and kept going. That sounds like a small thing. For me, it felt like a closing. I want to come back to where I started. The therapeutic window. The range between the dose that heals and the dose that kills. Here is what I have understood this past year. My whole life I was looking for the right dose of everything. Trust, attention, suspicion, closeness. I stayed carefully in the middle and called it wisdom. I believed that if you did not deviate from the normal range, you would be safe. But safety and life are not the same thing. I understood that late. Not catastrophically late, but late. If you are listening to this and thinking that your marriage is stable because you both stay within certain limits, I want you to ask yourself one question. Whose limits are those? Who set them and when? I am not saying you should be suspicious of everything. I am saying that the questions that seem unnecessary are sometimes the only ones that matter. I did not become a different person after all of this. I am still the same person I was, methodical, a little stubborn. I trust data more than instinct, but now I know you have to actually look at the data. Not because you distrust someone, because sometimes the data tells you things no one else will. Ava is singing a different line now. Marcus just opened the refrigerator. I can hear it from here. He does it every 20 minutes, exactly like his father. Sophie is at the table with homework, sighing occasionally in a way that suggests the assignment has personally offended her. An ordinary December evening. A dark green table, coffee, December outside the window. This is enough, not perfect. Enough. And the difference between those two words is bigger than it sounds.